Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, March 5th, 2026. Here's what's ahead. President Donald Trump says he is removing the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Gnome and nominating Senator Markwayne Mullin, Republican of Oklahoma, as the new secretary. The House votes down a War Powers Act resolution that would have restricted President Trump's ability to wage war on Iran. Congressman Tony Gonzalez, Republican of Texas, admits he had an affair with a staff member who later committed suicide. House Republican leaders are calling on him to no longer seek re-election. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says medical schools have agreed to increase instruction on good nutrition. And the National Park Service predicts the peak bloom dates for the cherry blossom trees in Washington, D.C. That and more ahead on Washington Today. Associated Press writing that President Donald Trump on Thursday fired his embattled Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Gnome after mounting criticism over her leadership of the department, including the handling of the administration's immigration crackdown and disaster response. Trump said he would nominate Oklahoma Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin in her place and make Gnome a special envoy for the Shield of the Americas, a new security initiative that he said would focus on the Western Hemisphere. Gnome is the first Trump cabinet member to be ousted from her post. That was from AP. Secretary Noem writing today on X, "Thank you, President Trump, for appointing me as the special envoy for the Shield of the Americas. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth are incredible leaders, and I look forward to working with them closely to dismantle cartels that have poured drugs into our nation and killed our children and grandchildren." Senator Markwayne Mullin spoke to reporters on the steps of the U.S. Capitol building about the intention from the president to nominate him as the new Homeland Security Secretary.
Not a complete surprise, but it came at a little bit of surprise for us. And so the president and I, as you guys know, we're great friends, and we get along great. I look forward to working with him and his cabinet. Of course, we still got to go through this little thing called confirmation, and we're going to get started on it right away.
What did he say to you?
You guys have been with me long enough, ask me enough questions. You know I don't share private conversations.
Are you Tell me your reaction. Are you going to the White House today?
I don't think I'm going today. I think I need to talk to my wife first.
Do you expect to get support from Democrats?
Tell us your reaction when you got the phone call from him.
I was excited. I mean,
when you saw his name calling.
Well, it came from the White House, so it came from the switchboard. But I was excited. The president, first of all, the president, I have a really good relationship. We talk all the time, anyways. I've got to be honest with you, I wasn't expecting the call today, but super excited. And I'm more excited about just ready to get started. There's a lot of work we can do to get Department of Homeland Security working, working for the American people. You know, the Department of Homeland Security has a very broad jurisdiction, and I think there's a lot of work that we need to do, and I'm excited about it.
Senator Fetterman says he's going to vote for you. Do you expect other Democrats to vote for you?
John already texted me, and of course you guys know John and I are friends too, and so I don't know. We're going to try to earn everybody's vote. I want people to understand. When I go into this position, yes, I'm a Republican, yes, I'm conservative. But Department of Homeland Security is to keep everybody, regardless if you support me, if you don't support me, regardless of what your thoughts are. I'm here to enforce the policies that Congress passed, and right now I'm part of it, but once I make that transition, my focus is to keep the Homeland secure. That's going to be my focus, and we're super excited about this opportunity.
Senator, will you commit to doing immigration? Senator, Democrats take...
Hold on, let me go here.
Any lessons learned from the past?
Senator Schumer said that the rot is throughout the agency, and that changing the head at the top may not necessarily change the culture at the agency. What do you tell Democrats?
I'm going to have a conversation with if Mr. Schumer wants to sit down and talk to me. I'm going to sit down and talk to him. I want to try to earn their support, and I'm going to be very open and honest with them. And at the end of the day, all I can do is do my job. And so I'm not going to get in a tit for tat. But if they have real concerns, I'm going to listen to it. I'm going to see if it's practical. But nothing's going to prevent me from doing my job. I'm going to enforce the policies and the laws that Congress has passed, and we're going to protect our homeland.
Senator, you know that immigration enforcement.
Just looking at some of
I'm going to take one more. And then I need to go.
Thank you, Senator. Just looking at some of the criticism that Gnome has faced. Is there any learning lessons that you have picked up from Gnome in the ways in which you want to lead the agency a little bit differently?
Kristi is a friend, and I haven't had time to call Kristi yet, and our Secretary Gnome, and our families are friends. She was tasked to do a very difficult job, and I think she has performed the best she can do underneath the circumstances. Is there always lessons to be learned? listen, my wife and I, we have, over the years, we have been fortunate enough to purchase companies and grow our companies, and every day there's something you can do better. And so I think there's an opportunity to build off successes, and there's also opportunities to build off things that maybe didn't go quite as planned. So,
Senator, you know immigration.
I don't want anybody running.
Senator Markwayne Mullin, Republican from Oklahoma, speaking to reporters on the steps of the U.S. Capitol building in Washington after the news that he will be nominated as the new Homeland Security Secretary, replacing the now outgoing Secretary, Kristi Gnome. President Donald Trump writing on Truth Social, "I am pleased to announce that the highly respected United States Senator from the great state of Oklahoma, Markwayne Mullin, will become the United States Secretary of Homeland Security effective March 31st, 2026. The current Secretary, Kristi Gnome, who has served us well and has had numerous and spectacular results, especially on the border, will be moving to be Special Envoy for the Shield of the Americas, our new security initiative in the Western Hemisphere we are announcing on Saturday in Doral, Florida. I thank Kristi for her service at Homeland." That post from President Donald Trump. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, also spoke to reporters outside the U.S. Capitol about this change.
The president has fired Kristi Noem. Good riddance. But the problems at this agency, at ICE, transcend any one person. The rot is deep. The president has to end the violence and rein in ICE.
What would you need to confirm Senator Mullin to this position? Do you need assurances on immigration?
This is a problem of policy, not personnel. The rot is deep. No one person can straighten this up until the president changes the whole agency, stops the violence, and reins in ICE.
What do you think about his selection of Senator Mullin to lead this agency?
I told you, this is not an issue of personnel. It's an issue of policy. The rot is way deep down. It transcends any one individual.
Mr. Leader, some Democrats are saying that they think this might make it easier for your negotiations on DHS.
That's up to them. They've been stonewalling us.
But you're in the negotiations.
They've been stonewalling us on the most important issues, and those have to change, and they have to change them. We have to change them by legislation, because any one person, I don't trust any one person being in charge of this agency as long as Trump is president, given the policies he's espoused, given how ICE has been structured. The rot is deep.
Does that mean that Democrats are going to block any nominee from getting through?
As I said, he's got to change the whole policies in ICE. It's not a personnel issue, so I wouldn't focus on that.
So a legislative fix has to come before you for the nominee.
Thank you, Senator.
The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, speaking with reporters on the U.S. Capitol steps. New York Times writing about the announcement today that the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Gnome is out, according to President Trump, and Senator Markwayne Mullin, Republican from Oklahoma, will be nominated as the new secretary. On Thursday, the president contradicted remarks that Ms. Gnome made under penalty of perjury in her hearing before a Senate panel on Wednesday that Mr. Trump had signed off on a border security advertising campaign featuring Ms. Gnome. "I never knew anything about it," Mr. Trump told Reuters. A White House spokeswoman declined to comment and referred a reporter to Mr. Trump's comments to Reuters. That was from the New York Times. The questions in the hearing were from Senator John Kennedy, Republican from Louisiana, who spoke to reporters today.
Can we get your reaction to Senator Mullin being named DHS?
I didn't want to mention it before because it would have violated the confidence, but the president, when he called me Tuesday night, the night of the hearing, when he was mad as a murder hornet, he asked me what I thought about Markwayne, and I said, A, I like him. B, very smart. C, he's a very good businessman.
Senator John Kennedy, Republican from Louisiana, speaking to reporters today. More reaction. Senator Tom Tillis, Republican from North Carolina, writing on X, Senator Markwayne Mullin is a great guy and a great choice to lead DHS, restore competence, and refocus efforts on quickly distributing disaster aid, keeping the border secure, and targeting violent illegal immigrants for deportation. Another big positive, he likes dogs. That from Senator Thom Tillis. And Senator Tammy Baldwin, Democrat from Wisconsin, posting, Kristi Noem deserved to be fired, but the damage she's caused cannot be undone. Alex Preddy and Renee Good cannot be brought back, and ICE still needs to be reined in. I will keep fighting for accountability and common sense guardrails that protect Americans. That post from Senator Tammy Baldwin. Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, also spoke to reporters today.
So look, I think it's positive news that Kristi Noem is being essentially fired. She should have been fired a long time ago. It is telling and at the same time distressing that what seems to have gotten her fired was her PR campaign, because she acknowledged that the president was aware and supportive of this PR campaign, this $220 million boondoggle, this waste of taxpayer resources that largely promoted Kristi Noem. That was a sweetheart contract given to the husband of one of her staff, also someone who did her PR back in South Dakota. That was a horrible waste of taxpayer resources. But this was what ended up apparently, reportedly, getting her fired when her leadership at the agency resulted in Americans getting killed in Minneapolis and elsewhere, and the kind of chaos we've seen throughout the country says a lot about the priorities and the concerns of this administration. But look, I'm glad she's going, and soon I hope gone, and pray that there's a new chapter for DHS, but I will believe it when I see it.
Senator, do you some Democrats have said perhaps this could help with the DHS negotiations. What do you think?
I don't know. It couldn't hurt, but I suspect that the White House is really running the DHS negotiations. They're going to call the shots when it comes to what kind of reforms they're going to support. So I don't see it immediately changing the dynamic, but look, I think it's an unmitigated positive to see her leave the administration. There really has been almost no accountability for any of the overwhelming malfeasance in the administration. So finally, there is at least some accountability.
Senator, are you a yes on Markwayne Mullin? And do you think there's anything he can do or should be doing if he gets another?
I'm going to reserve judgment on Senator Mullin. We'll hear what he has to say. I start out with a great deal of skepticism, to be candid, that he or anyone else is prepared to change the policies of that department. Because I think the policies of the department are coming from the president. And the president is okay with chaos in our streets. We're not seeing chaos around the world. He is very much the chaos president. That is his leadership style, for lack of a better description. So I don't know whether a new secretary is going to change that, but I will wait to hear what he has to say.
Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, speaking to reporters on the steps of the Capitol building in Washington. Governor Kevin Stitt, Republican from Oklahoma, who will be able to appoint a replacement to Senator Markwayne Mullin, Republican of Oklahoma, if Senator Mullin is confirmed as the new Homeland Security Secretary, posting today. Markwayne Mullin has been a fighter for Oklahoma and will fight to keep our nation secure. There isn't a better choice to lead the Department of Homeland Security. Oklahoma has been an example to the nation for smart immigration enforcement, and Markwayne will bring that common sense to DHS. I'll be looking to appoint a strong, small government conservative voice to support President Trump and protect Oklahomans' way of life. That post from Governor Kevin Stitt. Not long after President Trump's announcement online that there is going to be a new Homeland Security Secretary, the current Secretary, Kristi Noem, spoke at the Major Cities Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. She did not address the news that she was being replaced, and no one in the audience asked her about it. She did talk about the work of her department.
You know, we're seeing challenges across the country from judges and courts that are working to stop some of our efforts, that are looking to take away some of the protections that you need in law to do your work. And then also we're seeing some challenges from sanctuary states and sanctuary cities. In fact, after I get done sharing a few more words, I want to hear your questions on ways that we can help you do your jobs. If you're in a situation where the laws may be a little different than it is in other states, or you may have unique challenges that perhaps we could work together on to find ways to help you bring criminals to justice and to protect your community from public safety threats. America is the greatest country in the world, and it's the greatest country in the world that has great cities and great communities, regardless of where people live. We need to make sure that they have an opportunity to go to work every day safely and to send their kids to school safely every day. Sanctuary cities do give us a challenge because it makes it difficult at times for law enforcement to do their work. And we see that many times when a city cooperates with the federal government, cooperates with our federal officers, that it is safer. In fact, 7 of our top 10 safest countries in the nation are not sanctuary cities. They're cities where the local law enforcement partners with us. They partner with our federal agencies, with the FBI, DEA, ATF, CBP, ICE, and our operations. And we've also seen across the country where 5 of our 10 most crime-ridden cities do not cooperate with us, where those that are not cooperative with federal officers will see challenges on their streets. We've seen a lot of different situations from city to city. The one thing I would encourage you that no matter how frustrated you may be with some of that, that we can find a way to work together to do some good work for our people.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem today at the Major Cities Conference in Nashville, Tennessee, giving a speech and taking audience questions right after President Donald Trump announced he will be nominating a new Homeland Security Secretary. Chicago Mayor J.B. Pritzker, a Democrat who has opposed Trump administration's federal immigration and anti-crime crackdowns in big cities, including his, posted this short video.
Hey, Kristi Noem, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Here's your legacy. Corruption and chaos. Parents and children tear-gassed. Moms and nurses, U.S. citizens getting shot in the face. Now that you're gone, don't think you get to just walk away. I guarantee you, you will still be held accountable.
Chicago Mayor J.B. Pritzker in a video. CBS News writing about the announcement of a new Homeland Security Secretary nominated to replace Secretary Gnome. The president's decision earlier this year to put border czar Tom Homan, an internal rival of Gnome, in charge of winding down the Minneapolis operation underscored his displeasure with her performance, 2 administration officials told CBS News. Since then, ICE has sought to more heavily focus on arresting immigrants in the U.S. illegally who also have criminal records, while indiscriminate and roving Border Patrol operations in major U.S. cities, once led by vocal Commander Gregory Bovino, have been largely halted. The final straw appeared to come during her testimony before the Senate earlier this week, where she faced sharp criticism not only from Democrats but also Republicans. In particular, Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana questioned the secretary about her decision to spend $220 million on an ad campaign aimed at reducing illegal immigration. He wanted to know, how do you square that concern for waste, which I share, with the fact that you have spent $220 million running TV ads that feature you prominently? That was from CBS News. The Homeland Security Department has been shut down since mid-February. Democrats insisting that a funding measure include reforms to federal immigration operations. The House took up another Homeland Security Department funding bill today without the immigration reforms the Democrats want. Here's some of the debate. Mark Amodei, Republican from Nevada, chairs the Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee.
As the chairman of the Homeland Security Subcommittee, obviously, I rise today in strong support of the fiscal year 2026 Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. Later today, we will vote on this bill for a second time in 2 months. It shouldn't be necessary. The committee negotiated a full-year bill on a bicameral, bipartisan basis. Our bill includes reforms like funding for body-worn cameras, negotiated amongst both sides, both houses. De-escalation training, something else that we've heard about. Democrats continue to insist on proposals which would prevent the enforcement of immigration law. So it's disappointing that we must cajole our colleagues to support this bipartisan bill once again. But here we are. The Department of Homeland Security has now been shut down for more than 3 weeks with no apparent end in sight. Let's really talk about, just for a second, why we're here. One of the biggest successes of the present administration is what they've done on the border and what they've done in terms of ending unlimited immigration from the previous administration and how they're trying to clean that up. That is a phenomenal sore spot amongst some of my colleagues. And you know what? Why are we here with this? Why are we ignoring TSA and all the stuff you're going to hear throughout this? We've got Secret Service, we've got FEMA, we've got all of these things going on, Coast Guard. Why are we ignoring all those? Because the thing that really upsets them is the success on the number one issue that this administration ran on, which was cleaning up the border. So now, when you've got some operations in the Twin Cities that are under investigation, it's like, here we go. We can fix on this, trying to take the plum so far of this administration's accomplishments.
Congressman Mark Amadei, Republican from Nevada, on the House floor opposing this bill. Congresswoman Betty McCollum, Democrat from Minnesota.
The Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, well, it fails to address the dangerous and illegal activities from DHS agents in Minnesota that we have witnessed since the Operation Metro Surge, and they're still going on. Our neighbors were racially profiled, detained without cause. Peaceful demonstrators were threatened and harassed, continue to be. American citizens were assaulted and kidnapped from their homes and even killed in our streets. Democrats are calling for common sense reforms that protect our communities and our rights. We want ICE and agent borders to follow the same rules as our local law enforcement. Identify yourself, use your body camera, get a real judicial warrant when you enter a home, and establish a policy clearly for use of force. When DHS agents engage in illegal or dangerous behavior, we want independent investigations to hold them accountable. I will not vote for more funding for ICE or CBC until this Congress includes those reforms, period. Republicans should allow a vote on Ranking Member Delores' bill that would separate ICE and Border Patrol and Secretary Noem's office while we negotiate real reforms. It would fund the law-abiding components of DHS, like the Coast Guard and FEMA and Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agent, known as CISA. CISA works to protect our critical infrastructure, our emergency communications, and our election systems. In Minnesota, when we learned that the hard way, when St. Paul suffered a major cyber attack last system, it took us weeks to recover. I'm puzzled by Republicans in this bill would cut $268 million from CISA. We should be increasing money for cybersecurity, not reducing it, and I urge my colleagues to vote no.
Congresswoman Betty McCollum, Democrat from Minnesota, on the House floor. The House passed this bill by a vote of 221 to 209, almost entirely party line, with Republicans voting yes and Democrats voting no. But 4 Republicans did vote yes. A similar bill has passed the House before, but has not gotten the 60 votes needed in the Senate because the Republicans have a majority in that chamber, but not a supermajority. NPR writing with the busy spring break travel season looming, travel and aviation industry leaders urge Congress to end the stalemate over funding for the Department of Homeland Security before federal workers at airports miss a full paycheck. DHS has been shut down for nearly 3 weeks after lawmakers failed to negotiate a budget deal to fund the agency or agree on changes to how immigration officers operate. Many of the Transportation Security Administration's roughly 64,000 employees are considered essential workers and have to stay on the job anyway. That's the article from NPR. Jeff Freeman, CEO of the U.S. Travel Association, was at today's news conference at the National Press Club in Washington with aviation workers.
Last week, America's transportation security workforce received only a partial paycheck. Soon, if Congress does not act, that becomes no paycheck at all. The men and women screening more than 2 million passengers every single day, the people standing between our aviation system and those who would do it harm, they're showing up, they're doing their job, and they're not getting paid. It's not just unfair, it's reckless. You can't run an industry with $3 trillion in economic impact on IOUs. You can't ask essential workers to protect America's skies while Washington argues over their paychecks. And you can't afford to ignore what happens when you do. We know what this costs because, unfortunately, we've just been through it. The last shutdown cost the U.S. economy more than $6 billion in just 6 weeks. More than 5 million trips disrupted, $200 million in delays alone. And those are just the numbers we can measure. What's harder to measure, but just as real, is what happens to the workforce itself. The average TSA officer earns about $35,000 per year. These are not workers who can shrug off a missed paycheck. These are paychecks that cover groceries, rent, childcare, gas. This is money that families depend on. And when the workforce is hurting, staffing weakens, and the entire aviation system becomes less reliable for every single traveler who passes through it. And this is not a partisan issue. An overwhelming percentage of Americans across both parties support guaranteeing pay for TSA officers. The American public understands what's at stake. It's time for Congress to do its job. We're not here today asking for a temporary patch. We're not here for a last-minute deal struck at the 11th hour that buys a few more weeks or months. We're here for a permanent solution.
Jeff Freeman, CEO of the U.S. Travel Association, at a news conference today in Washington. Reuters writing about it. Carriers are expecting a record-breaking spring travel period with 171 million passengers expected to fly, up 4% over the same two-month period last year, said Chris Sununu, CEO of the trade association Airlines for America. He castigated lawmakers for not voting to end the shutdown. He said the fear is that, once again, they're not going to act until something really desperate happens, until we get long lines. That was from Reuters. This is Washington Today. From Associated Press, House Speaker Mike Johnson and the GOP leadership are calling for Congressman Tony Gonzalez of Texas to withdraw from his reelection race after he admitted having an affair with a former staff member who later died by suicide. Republican leadership announced its decision Thursday, a day after Gonzalez acknowledged a relationship that has upturned the political world in his home state and in Washington, and after the House Ethics Committee announced an investigation into his conduct. We have encouraged him to address these very serious allegations directly with his constituents and his colleagues, said Johnson, the Majority Leader Steve Scalise, Whip Tom Emmer, and GOP Conference Chairwoman Lisa McClain in a statement. They went on, in the meantime, leadership has asked Congressman Gonzalez to withdraw from his race for re-election. That was from Associated Press. Here is part of Congressman Gonzalez Wednesday night on a podcast.
I made a mistake, and I had a lapse in judgment, and there was a lack of faith, and I take full responsibility for those actions. Since then, I've reconciled with my wife, Angel. I've asked God to forgive me, which he has, and my faith is as strong as ever. When you make mistakes like this, you know, it's never easy. It humbles you, but it's important to kind of work through it all. You know, I look forward to the ethics committee starting an investigation. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to provide all the facts and all the details that lead to exactly what occurred in the entire situation.
Congressman Tony Gonzalez, Republican of Texas, on the Joe Pags YouTube show Wednesday night. More from the Associated Press article. Speaker Johnson has been under enormous pressure from his own Republican lawmakers to take action, and several Republicans have already called for Gonzalez to step aside. GOP leaders notably did not call for Gonzalez to resign as they struggle to maintain their slim majority in the House, which they hold by only a handful of seats. That was from AP. Senator Steve Daines, Republican from Montana, begins a Washington Post article, said Wednesday night that he would not run for re-election this year, opening up his Senate seat 8 months before the midterm elections. Daines, 63, had filed to run for re-election, but withdrew minutes before Montana's filing deadline of 5 p.m. Mountain Time on Wednesday, according to a spokesperson for the Montana Secretary of State's office. 8 minutes before the filing deadline, Kurt Alme, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Montana, filed to run and almost immediately received President Donald Trump's endorsement. That was from the Washington Post. Senator Daines posted a video.
Serving the people of Montana in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate the past 13 years has been the greatest honor of my professional career. I'm grateful to God for allowing me to serve. But after much careful thought, I've decided not to seek re-election. Prior to public service, I spent 28 years in the private sector. And while I found those years very rewarding, they didn't compare to the fulfillment I found in public service. I'm energized, I'm encouraged, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. I'm also very thankful to have served alongside President Trump and my colleagues in the Senate. Together, we built a conservative majority on the Supreme Court. We spearheaded Republican control of the U.S. Senate. We delivered the largest tax cut in U.S. history. We unleashed American energy dominance and secured our southern border. We also enacted the bipartisan Great American Outdoors Act, the most significant conservation achievement in half a century. And we forged stronger ties with critical allies around the world. I'm especially indebted to my exceptional staff, who have worked tirelessly each day to serve Montanans. Thank you for creating countless raving fans through your efforts. And finally, I'm most grateful to my sweet wife, Cindy, of 39 years. For the past 13 years, Cindy has selflessly dropped me off at the airport at 5 a.m. on most Mondays for that commute back to D.C. And together, Cindy and I look forward to the next chapter, like cherishing moments with 7 grandchildren, spending a bit more time in Montana, and continuing to make a difference.
U.S. Senator Steve Daines, Republican from Montana, posting that video Wednesday night saying he will not run for a third 6-year term this year. He is the 6th Republican senator not seeking re-election. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Hello, political junkies. Searching for new and original political stories without political bias? Well, search no more, because, wow, does C-SPAN have just the place for you? The new Extreme Wortman podcast. Every week, hear compelling clips straight from the C-SPAN archives. Iconic, obscure, and everything in between. Inspired by real-life events happening right now. Find Extreme Wortman wherever you get podcasts.
Support for C-SPAN Radio comes from YouTube.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. A few more headlines from Bloomberg government. The Senate on Thursday unanimously passed bipartisan legislation that aims to strengthen privacy settings for teenagers online, reviving momentum on the stalled effort as tech companies face criticism over risks to young people on their platforms. The bill is called COPPA 2.0 for Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act. And from the Washington Post, the Federal Planning Commission on Thursday delayed a vote on President Donald Trump's planned White House ballroom until next month, citing, quote, significant public input, including tens of thousands of comments, nearly all of them critical of the project. Again, that was from the Washington Post. And now to the war in Iran. New York Times writing, the war continued to widen Thursday as Israeli evacuation orders for the southern suburbs of Beirut sparked panic. European countries accelerated their deployment of military assets in the Middle East, and world leaders braced for the impact on the global economy. On the 6th day of a sustained campaign of U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran, President Trump told 2 news outlets that he wants to be involved in picking a new leader for Iran. In an interview with Axios, Mr. Trump said that a son of the former leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who appeared to be the top candidate to succeed his father, was an unacceptable choice. That was from the New York Times. In Washington, the House voted down a war powers resolution that would have prohibited U.S. military action against Iran without congressional authorization. The vote was 212 to 219. The House vote was today. The floor debate was Wednesday. Here's Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican of Kentucky, who supported it.
Why are we going to war with Iran? We owe our military service members a clear mission. And American families in my district want to know how this is going to help them pay for groceries. How does this make them any safer in their schools or in their neighborhoods? How does this help them pay for housing? Have we learned nothing from the laundry list of wars and regime change experiments we sparked across the Middle East that have racked up a total of at least $8 trillion of debt in Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan? A sustained war with Iran will not stabilize the region. It's already ignited the region. It will radicalize new generations of terrorists, and it will send more swarms of refugees into Europe and the United States. Iran is not Venezuela. The Ayatollah was not a president. He was a religious leader from a region notorious for radical Islamists. And the United States and Israel turned him into a martyr. And in the process of doing so, we've already expended billions of dollars, and more solemnly, 6 American families must now lay to rest their sons and daughters. And for what? This administration can't even give us a straight answer as to why we launched this preemptive war. The president says we had to strike first because an Iranian strike was imminent. Meanwhile, the Department of Defense conceded there was no evidence of an imminent Iranian strike. Some told us this war was about nuclear weapons, but 6 months ago, we were assured our last strike on Iran decimated their nuclear program. So which is it? I think the most candid answer came from the Secretary of State, who told the press that Israel forced our hand and dragged us into this war again. And that truth is the very reason why it is Congress that must decide war. If American lives are to be risked and American blood is to be shed, that decision must be debated and voted on by the representatives of the American people. And that debate is meant to be arduous. And that vote is meant to be hard. I have a theory. I think my colleagues don't want to go on record because we have a terrible track record of meddling in the Middle East. They don't want their name associated with this when it doesn't turn out well. But Congress cannot be bothered with its constitutional duty because for many in this chamber, it's easier to simply allow someone else's sons and daughters to be sent to combat without their vote. And to be clear, we aren't even here to declare war today. All we're voting on is a war powers resolution to reassert the Constitution, that Congress must decide questions of war. And if Congress wants war, then the Speaker should hold a vote to declare it.
Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, on the House floor on Wednesday before today's vote on the Iran war powers resolution. Congressman Corey Mills, Republican of Florida, opposed the resolution.
I think that Iran and the regime has made it very clear when they're chanting death to America, the thousands of lives that they've changed with either maiming or killing American troops or civilians abroad, but also likelihood. We know that they're able to build 100-plus missiles a day. They know they had ICBMs. We've now found out they had the hypersonic ballistic capabilities as they've targeted over 6 different countries. But you know, the thing that we talk about, the JCPOA, as it was just mentioned, Resolution 2231, where the administration tried to come up with an idea of a negotiation that led to diplomatic and peaceful solutions. But it was continually violated by this regime, as even the General Secretary Ban Ki-moon and Gutierrez had pointed out multiple times, as the Iranian regime sent mid-range ballistic missiles to the Houthis and into other areas to continue to attack Americans and the West. But the hypocrisy is what I really want to point out here, not the fact that we already understand the Article 2 authorities that the president has, which is well within the bounds constitutionally, not to mention the fact that this body, before I came into Congress, was already abdicating their roles and responsibilities under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, when they started doing things like AUMFs. But let's point to things like what we saw in Libya. It was very clear in 2011, as we see here in military intervention, that it was without prior congressional authorization, relying instead on a UN Security Council resolution and legal justification from the Department of Justice that argued that the administration had limited non-ground troop missions and doesn't constitute hostilities. Mr. Chairman, that's exactly what we have here, no ground troops. But it also goes on further to justify, under the United Nations mandates, international mandates, and the legal justification, to say that because they were focused on protecting civilians, not sustained fighting, and didn't involve ground troops. Well, I don't know about you, but I think 40-plus Iranian civilians peacefully protesting for a change, being brutally murdered, being raped, being tortured, being slaughtered, being hung from cranes, being persecuted and imprisoned. I think President Trump stopping this after 47 years was protecting civilian lives. I think it's established that we had no boots on the ground. And I think that we have demonstrated the imminence, the likelihood, and intent of an evil regime to try and go ahead and attack Americans and threaten our way of life.
Congressman Corey Mills, Republican from Florida, on the House floor on Wednesday, and the House voted on this resolution today, defeating it by a vote of 212 to 219. 2 Republicans voted yes, Davidson of Ohio and the resolution co-author Massie of Kentucky. 4 Democrats voted no, Golden of Maine, Cuellar of Texas, Landsman of Ohio, and Vargas of California. The Senate on Wednesday also voted down an Iran war powers resolution, 47 to 53. President Donald Trump talked about Iran and the military strikes from the U.S. and Israel today at an unrelated event. He was honoring the champions of Major League Soccer, Inter Miami, at the White House.
And I'm once again calling on all members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the military, and the police to lay down their arms. They're only going to be killed. And now is the time to stand up for the Iranian people and help take back your country. You're going to have a chance after all these years to take back your country. Accept immunity. We'll give you immunity. And we'll be giving you really the right side of history, because that's what it is. So you'll be perfectly safe with total immunity, or you'll face absolutely guaranteed death. And I don't want to see that. They don't want to see it either. We also urge Iranian diplomats around the world to request asylum and to help us shape a new and better Iran with great potential. It's a country with great potential. There's much better future for Iran. It's now beginning. It's going to be, I think, a great future. And the United States will ensure that whoever leads the country next, Iran will not threaten America or its neighbors, Israel, anybody. If you look at what happened, they had missiles aimed at all of these other countries, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, many others, that weren't really involved very much, and they had missiles aimed. Well, they were aimed there long before this ever started. They were going after the entire Middle East.
President Donald Trump at the White House, the start of an event on a completely different subject. He was hosting the champions of Major League Soccer, but making comments about Iran. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth traveled to U.S. Central Command headquarters in Tampa, Florida today, meeting with the commander, Admiral Brad Cooper, for updates on Operation Epic Fury, the name of the U.S. military operation against Iran. In Washington, the Defense Undersecretary for Policy, Elbridge Colby, testified again. Today, he was before the House Armed Services Committee. Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs, Democrat from California, asked him about the attacks.
Are we at war with Iran?
I think we're in a military action at this point. I'll leave it to Congress and lawyers, et cetera, from the administration to determine the exact.
Okay, so yesterday, the president said we're doing very well on the war front. And previously, he said we should expect American casualties because, quote, that often happens in war. So is the president wrong when he says we are at war?
Well, I won't add or subtract anything to the president. I wouldn't presume to do so, but I know this is a material matter in front of the Congress and between the administration, and I'm not the right person to weigh in on exactly the criteria.
Okay. You said that regime change is not one of the objectives of this military operation. Is that correct?
Of the U.S. military campaign at this time as directed by the president.
Okay. If that's the case, can you explain why the first military target of the joint U.S.-Israeli operation was Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei?
My understanding is that's an Israeli strike. We can get you more detail, including this afternoon in the classified briefing.
Okay, well, President Trump clearly disagrees because he immediately took credit for this, saying, I got him before he got me. And shortly after the strikes on Saturday, Trump told the Iranian people, bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we're finished, take over your government. It will be yours. This is probably your only chance for generations. And your boss, Secretary Hegseth, literally said he made sure that the people responsible in the Iranian regime to try and take out President Trump were on the target list. How does arming the Kurds and encouraging a civil war advance our military objectives of degrading Iran's power projection capabilities?
Ma'am, I'm not sure I can comment on that. I'm just not tracking it specifically, but I can get into it, get back to you or into classified.
Okay, great. I'd like to enter into the record 3 articles about how we are arming the Kurds.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so you won't say if we're at war. You won't say if regime change is actually part of our thing. Do you agree that there is a risk of Iran becoming a failed state?
I think there are a wide range of risks, but I think those are the kinds of things that we are precisely seeking to avoid and capitalize on to make sure it's net beneficial for the American people.
Okay, and does the department actually have a plan to avoid that and prevent a failed state in this very strategic part of the world?
Well, without fixating on the specific eventuality, ma'am, I would say the department is actively planning to ensure that we are, deliver on the president's objective of a net beneficial result for this military campaign.
Okay, you keep saying that it's important that we have a plan and that you are working on the plan. What is the plan?
Ma'am, I can, it may be worth when my colleagues, or we can go in, but particularly when my colleagues come over and brief this afternoon, you may ask them. Obviously, we're not going to talk about that in open session.
Okay. How long will this war last? How much longer will our service members have to sacrifice their lives?
So I'm not going to take away the president's decision space. He's got the wide range. He's the master of that. As he has indicated, and Chairman Kaine as well, the military campaign, at least at this point, has been scoped out, or I would say people have discussed it as roughly 3, 4, 5 weeks. But that, of course, does not constrain the president's decision space. But again, goes back to the kind of phasing of the military campaign that's been given specifically to the U.S. Armed Forces.
Elbridge Colby, Defense Undersecretary for Policy, questioned by Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs, Democrat from California, at today's Armed Services Committee hearing. The Hill, writing about this hearing, has this on a different subject. The House Armed Services Committee Chair, Mike Rogers, Republican of Alabama, on Thursday went after Pentagon Policy Chief Elbridge Colby for not keeping Congress in the loop on force posture changes in Europe. In a hearing on the National Defense Strategy, Rogers accused the Trump administration of sidelining Congress in its decision to pull a U.S. combat brigade from Romania in October. He said he had spoken repeatedly with top military officials overseeing U.S. European Command who had advised keeping the brigade in place. That was from The Hill. You can find this full hearing at our video library at cspan.org. Back to Iran, Al Jazeera writing that President Donald Trump has said he supports Kurdish forces launching an offensive against Iran in comments made during an interview with Reuters. He said, "I think it's wonderful that they want to do that. I'd be all for it." When asked whether the U.S. would provide air cover for such an operation, Trump declined to confirm, saying, "I can't tell you that." He added that if Kurdish forces choose to move forward with an attack, their objective would be, quote, to win. That was from Al Jazeera. CNN, with bullet points on the war in Iran, has this: evacuations ramp up. Stranded passengers are starting to leave the Middle East as airlines schedule new services and governments rally charter flights, though many remain stuck in the region. Tommy Pigott, the State Department deputy spokesperson, has been doing a lot of interviews with media. One of his stops today was on Fox News.
The safety and security of the American people is our highest priority. To that end, we have a 24/7 task force that has been activated to surge resources to communicate security guidance and also assist with travel options for people that want to come home. We're identifying specific individuals with specific options in order to depart the region. That includes moving people from areas where airspace is closed to where airspace is open, where they might be able to get a charter or commercial flight. That also means that charter flights are underway. Currently, we've seen 20,000 Americans be able to return to the United States since this began, including 10,000 Americans that have been directly assisted by that task force. Bottom line is this: if you're an American in the region that is looking to depart the region, please call +1 202 501 4444. We are working 24/7 to bring you home.
And Tommy, we have that number up on the screen too, so that's a good reminder for everyone. Do people have to pay for these charter flights?
No, these charter flights are at no cost to American citizens.
Okay.
So please register. We're identifying specific people with specific travel options.
Tommy Pigott, State Department deputy spokesperson, today on Fox News. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has also been doing many interviews on U.S. media outlets. Today he was on NBC News.
President Trump has not ruled out boots on the ground in Iran. Are you afraid of a U.S. invasion in your country?
No, we are waiting for them.
You are waiting for the U.S. military to invade, the ground troops?
Yes, because we are confident that we can confront them, and that would be a big disaster for them.
So you're saying that Iran is ready and willing to take on the U.S. military if there were to be ground troops?
Well, we were ready for this war even more than the previous war. So you can see, the quality of our missiles, how much they are upgraded after the last war, because we learned lots of lessons. And we are prepared for any other eventuality, even, a ground invasion. So our soldiers are prepared for any scenario. When I said that we are waiting for them, it didn't mean that we are waiting for continuation of the war. No, but we have prepared ourselves to confront with any scenario, with any eventuality, any possibility, and we know that we can handle that.
The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, interviewed today by NBC News. Time magazine writing that British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is firmly standing by his decision to not join the initial strikes against Iran by the U.S. and Israel, a move that has earned him the wrath of President Donald Trump. He said at a news conference today, "My focus is providing calm, level-headed leadership in the national interest. That means having the strength to stand firm by our values and our principles, no matter the pressure to do otherwise. It was in the national interest, and I stand by it." Reporting from Time magazine. A reporter asked the Prime Minister today about the criticism from President Trump.
I've got Stephen from The Times. Stephen.
Prime Minister, Donald Trump has suggested that you've ruined the special relationship, that you are no Churchill. On the special relationship, is he right on that? Have you ruined the special relationship?
Look, the special relationship is in operation right now. We're working with the Americans in the deployment from our bases. We are working together in the region. The US and the British working together to protect both the US and the British in joint bases where we're jointly located, and we're sharing intelligence on 24/7 basis in the usual way. That is the special relationship. That is a special relationship in operation. And clearly it's for the President to take decisions that he considers in the national interest, the right decisions for the US. I understand that. I respect that. But equally, it's for me, as the British Prime Minister, to take decisions that I consider to be in the best interest of the United Kingdom. There's nothing controversial about that. The special relationship is operating right here at an important point.
The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer holding a news conference at 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister's residence in London. Reuters writing the damage to Israel's economy from the air war with Iran could reach more than 9 billion shekels. That's almost $3 billion a week, the finance ministry said on Wednesday. As for the U.S. economy, the Federal Reserve Vice Chair for Supervision, Michelle Bowman, was interviewed today at the New York Bankers Association meeting in New York City.
We'll begin with the broader economic picture. I want to note that we have a number of members of the press and media watching this as well, so we welcome all of you to NASDAQ as well. So as you've noted, in many conversations that you've had, inflation seems to be moving closer to the target. And I know you are laser focused on the labor market as well. And you come to the table with a lot of data on that, kind of showing some signs of moderation here and there. But also we now have an international situation and some geopolitical uncertainty with the conflict in Iran. So having all of that contributing to the economic markets, what is it that you are really looking out for in terms of shaping the Fed's policy this year?
Well, Claire, thank you for that question. And as you know, we, or you may not know, we go into blackout actually for our March meeting coming up on Friday, which is tomorrow at midnight. So it's nice to be able to have one or two last conversations publicly before we really start digging in and thinking about how that meeting will shape up. I've spoken since our January meeting. I think as we saw the 75 basis points of cuts that we implemented over the past few months of 2025, I decided that I was supportive of pausing in January at our meeting to just make sure we understood how that accommodation was making its way through the economy and hopefully into the labor market. I think since that time and since the January meeting, we've started to see some more information that is pointing a little bit more to signs of stabilizing in the labor market. So I'm looking forward to seeing echoes of that. We have an employment report that comes out tomorrow, and then next week we'll have an inflation report that comes out that'll help us understand a little bit more directionally where inflation is headed as well. So you're right, I have been laser focused on the labor market since late last spring when we started to really see some what I saw as some challenges, potential challenges, and had started to have a number of conversations with people across the country that are employers and how they were thinking about how they were going to plan to hire or not hire, I think is the case really what turned out to be over 2025. I think we saw the creation of about 200,000 jobs total through the entire year last year. So clearly I was onto something. There was a lot of fragility there, but I think our hope, or my hope, is that we're going to start to see some of that recede, and that we'll start to see a little bit more hiring and more growth. Again, I expect as we see the conditions changing and as we have started to engage in some conflicts internationally, I'll be watching closely how that may impact some markets, especially energy markets. But at this point, I think it's too early to tell what the impacts will be and how long those may go on for us to be able to monitor what those impacts may be and whether long-term or short-term.
Federal Reserve Vice Chair for Supervision Michelle Bowman in New York City at an event hosted by the New York Bankers Association. Wall Street today, the Dow down 784, NASDAQ down 58, S&P down 38. Stat News writing reflecting the Make America Healthy Again movement's focus on diet. 53 medical schools across 31 states have agreed to update their approach to nutrition education at the behest of the Trump administration. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made the announcement at the department's headquarters in Washington.
Today we mark an historic announcement delivering the solution to a problem the American Medical Association first identified 60 years ago when my uncle was president. Together with the Department of Education Secretary Linda McMahon, I'm pleased to announce a transformative breakthrough in medical education that will reshape as the way that we train doctors in our country and deliver on President Trump's promise to end the chronic disease epidemic in America. 53 medical schools across 31 states are driving the national movement to champion nutrition education and reshape the future of medical training. Beginning this fall, these schools will require every medical student to complete 40 hours of comprehensive nutrition education or competency equivalent before graduating. More than 30,000 physicians each year will now graduate equipped with nutrition education to help prevent, treat, and reverse chronic disease. This is how we implement the MAHA agenda. This is how we make America healthy again.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. joining the Education Secretary Linda McMahon at today's announcement. USA Today writing the predictions are in for Washington, D.C.'s 2026 cherry blossom season, which means we've almost made it to the end of a very brutal winter. The National Park Service Superintendent Kevin Grease made the announcement today. Beside him was an ice sculpture with the vital information embedded. In his hands, he had an ice pick and a hammer, and he decides to use the hammer.
This ice sculpture is very symbolic, and I appreciate the symbolism of it because I'm going to really get into this. So, Snow Creek, the winter, our bloom erupting from it into the spring, Snow Creek in winter erupting to our peak bloom. That's what this symbolizes. So, that microphone. What I'm supposed to do here is they gave me this thing. The peak bloom dates are inside that bloom. And just like my driveway, I have to get through this ice to get to the bloom dates. And they gave me this. So I'm a big guy, I got it. But I said, no, we're not doing that. I got this. Now, I was going to destroy this, but they said, watch out for the people, so I'm not going to take you out. So, who would like me to use this one? And who would like me to use this one? All right. That speeds up the peak bloom. So here we go. Let's see if I can do this. I apologize for the carpet person, but Diana said I could do it. Peak bloom dates are March 29th to April 1st. Thank you very much. Oh, way to go. Didn't tell me about the America's Got Talent. I win!
National Park Service Superintendent Kevin Grease was surprised by the confetti that dropped on him after he made today's announcement. Park Service defines peak bloom as the period when 70% of the Yoshino cherry blossoms are open. About 3,800 cherry trees grow around the tidal basin at National Mall in Washington. Another 250 trees that were a gift from Japan in 2024 will be planted in the next few months. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Have a good night.